Hello, this is Kate Stillman with yogahealer.com here with Dr. Claudia Welch of drclaudiawelch.com. And we're here to talk about this time between solstice and New Year's and how to tap in and go in deep. But before we do, we have a quick announcement that on January 28th, we have another free call. It's kind of like an Ollie Ollie income free for our Healthier Hormones 6-week course, which starts the following week on February 4th. So the free call starts before the paid course, and it's just a way for you to tap into the conversation that we have in the course and really hear from Dr. Claudia in terms of how to understand your body and why you want to understand your body as you grow older day by day. It's a beautiful course. It's so deep in wisdom. And so that call on January 28th to sign up, go to yogahealer.com/healthier-hormones, and we'll get you right in into our conversation. And so without further ado, Dr. Claudia, let's talk about how you dive in between the winter solstice and New Year's.
Well, and before we do this, I want to recognize that there's some people who live in the southern hemisphere who might hear this call. And so what we're talking about is not going to exactly relate to their seasons. But for the northern hemisphere right now, the days are darker. They're the darkest. And this is the time to to go in and for the energy to move in and start nourishing the deeper internal organs instead of moving outwards and being expansive. This is really inward time, and it's really I don't know if paradox is the right word. I think it's not, but it's ironic that the holiday seasons tend to be such a draining time for people in that there's so much going out, families and functions and affairs and so forth. I don't mean romantic affairs. I mean
Yeah.
going out to some busy affair that you're going to, but
And money too.
and
And
money.
money goes out. Yeah.
You just hemorrhage, prana and money at this time of year, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so draining that's happening at the time where it's more natural to be going inwards and hibernating. So it feels that much more unnatural to be doing all this stuff. We want to be going home and drinking hot chocolate by the fire, and we're going out and socializing all the time. So I think it's all right to give ourselves the okay to maybe do some of that feels like the right thing to do, but to check how we're socializing. And maybe some of that socialization is like, hey, wear your pajamas and bring your hot chocolate cup, because what we're doing tonight is sitting by the fire and drinking hot chocolate. So that there's a different expectation on how to go through this, because otherwise it can be miserable.
Yeah, and what I find is that then people say, well, but if I want to do this differently, but what I do is so tied up into my family and my relationships, and I get swept up. So, any advice for people that have get sort of swept up, like they want to stay home, but in order to meet their unspoken agreements or their spoken agreements or their familial obligations or their friendship obligations, all of a sudden they're out 3, 4 nights a week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that this is the same advice that we have to look at for our world in general these days, because it's a very traditionally, archetypically,
Archetypically,
masculine,
we'll go with that.
archetypically, let's go with that, masculine world where that's always the thing. That's always the issue. It's never, the challenge is never to say yes to more things. It's always to say no to more things. It's always to to say no to what we don't want to be doing, and to kind of come home. So I think there's no getting around that takes courage, but the reward is huge, because the reward is you get to sit by the fire with the hot cocoa
Mm-hmm.
with the friend, and that feels great, or stay home and do something that feels really right, and we start tapping into what to who we are again, and to what integrity feels like, and that integrity is really comforting. It's a really comforting, wonderful feeling.
Mm. And so for people that are like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do things a little differently this year. and I'm going to only say yes to that which I'm really feeling a deep inner yes to, and I'm going to say no to stuff that just feels like it's bringing me away from center. Any any particular practices or rituals or just ways to tap in?
Well, one of the things I want to acknowledge too is that sometimes I think we do need to do obligations that we feel are right, but that are more social or something than we want. Like to recognize that that sometimes what our body is asking for, we may not be able to do that right at that moment. But to be careful to not let that be an unconscious pattern that dominates.
Mm-hmm.
That we say, okay, yeah, this is important, even though it's not really what I feel like I need to be doing. This is important for my relationships or obligations or whatever. But to really be careful that that isn't everything. That's one or two things. It's not. It's not everything. It's just checking in with that and just being committed to our own integrity and understanding that when we're not, it creates disorder. And we've talked about, in terms of hormones and hormone health, it being an ethical issue. And it's what we talk about in the course, that it's actually an ethical issue because so much of the stress we're under is because we're living lives we don't want to be living. And to turn that around and to start to have the integrity and courage to live the life we want to be living. And I'm not talking about selfishness here or fleeting desires. I'm talking about deep inner knowing about who I am and why I'm here and being committed to that. So it's not something that, you have to be rich to do or a prima donna to do or highly privileged, the 1% of the 1% to do. This is something that all of us can do no matter where we are.
And have to do if we want to experience integrity and energy and health is what I'm hearing in there.
Yeah, and if someone is watching this and saying, "What do you mean hormone balance is an issue of integrity?" I would just have to say we talk about this in the course, and that becomes clear in the course. But it is, and it is on us to choose that. And it's really, I think it's actually not a choice. We've talked about choice before too, and we talk about it in the course. But in terms of how to move through life with harmony and balance and do and live in integrity, I think that it ends up not becoming so much about choosing to do this or that, but about listening internally and seeing that there's a yes or a no, um, or maybe there's not a yes or a no, there's a nothing, and then we just wait for the yes or the no to come. So we've talked about this many times, but it's not so much that I choose to do this or that in my life. The only choice is I choose to listen internally to the yes or the no or the nothing, and then the only question is do I have the courage to follow that? So that takes practice. That it takes practice to listen internally, and this is a great time of year to do that. This is the time of year that supports doing that so much. A lot of people in Vermont, where I live, get kind of depressed when the days get shorter because it's going to be cold and dark for so long. But to me, I feel a certain relief with that. Like, okay, right, the nature herself is supporting me to go inside and hibernate and rejuvenate. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the sense of unscheduled time, of just not having that much to do, not having so many obligations that it's like, okay, what's next? Okay, check that off. Okay, regroup. Okay, what's next? But instead of just being able to even feel like, what do I want? Like you were saying, like, what is the inner yes? And it just takes that space element, the akasha, right, to be able to even hear. I love the idea of taking what you just said and making that into a ritual or practice of just creating a little space to feel the inner yes or the inner no. And that could easily be a 1-minute practice for people who are listening to do over the holidays. And just to say, when someone asks you a question, just pause, feel. And if you don't know, just say, like, I don't know yet. Right? But that can be a great practice. And then having that practice either in the beginning of the day or the end of the day or both, to just sit and feel and practice noticing what is What does yes and no feel like right now?
Amen. Good idea. And wherever you are listening to this call, I hope you are um, in touch with what's going on in nature, because we are part of nature. It's not like nature's out there and then we're interacting with it. We're part of it. We're part of this whole thing, and part of that practice of seeing what we want to be doing is just tuning into the greater fabric, and our position in that, and our part of that, our homogeneousness part of that, as making up a complete word. But
Perfect.
we are homogenous with it. We're not separate from it. And so to feel what that is, what does that feel like? What does nature feel like for you? You're in your swimsuit, and you're you're
Goggles.
experiencing, you're and your goggle lines from swimming, and I'm in my sweater in Vermont, and we're having different experiences. And just tune into what is happening in nature and in the cycles and the time of day, and what is that supporting in us. It's really great. We become part of something bigger and not just all on our own, quote unquote, making these decisions. You know,
Yeah.
we just, whether or not we choose to become part of this natural cycle, we are part of it. And so it's kind of nice to wake up to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to add to that too, that sense of like, is there is there too much? Just what we started in the beginning of the conversation. Is there like too much going on? Do I get overwhelmed by the holidays because I get overscheduled? Like regardless of the climate, or what phase of life are you in right now? Are you in an energetic phase of drawing in? Have you been overextended? Or are you in a place of like, no, you're pretty harmonious and it's good. But just being so aware of that and living from that space is what I feel like we've been talking about, Claudia. And it's just so great to just that's part of it. And then in nature, when it's seamless, right? When we really study Ayurveda and we really get in tune with awake living and healthy living, it's seamless. Then noticing what's happening in the ecology, in the weather patterns, in the permaculture around you, right? In the natural ecosystem around you, that we become part of that. And to me, it's a next level stage of health. It's also an old level stage of health of like exactly what you're talking about. It's assimilation and integration and homogenization. So I just really want to invite everyone listening to like, what does that mean to you right now? Like how when whether you're outside taking a walk listening or when you look out the window, like how are you part of your
Yeah,
ecosystem?
that is the question: is how am I part of this? It's how, it's not scenery out there. The
Right.
world isn't scenery. It's how am I part of this? How am I part of this?
Hmm. Yay. Well, happy holidays, everyone. And we will catch up with you on January 28th at our Ollie Ollie Income Free call on women and Ayurvedic health. So, yay. Thanks, Dr. Claudia.
Great to be here. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.